Okay, my name's Al Larson. I live in Argyle. I grew up in East Grand Forks. Graduated from high school in East Grand Forks. Went to college at Augustana College in South Dakota for a year. Transferred to UND. Graduated from UND in 1959. In June, I was drafted into the Army I believe it was September.
The 59?
Yeah, 59. I went to, well, first we went to Fort Carson, Colorado for the indoctrination thing, and then we went to Fort Hood, Texas.
How'd you get to Fort Carson?
By train.
By train, okay.
That was quite a train trip.
Yeah.
And went to Fort Hood, Texas for basic training.
So you were at Fort Carson and you flew to Fort Hood?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got to Fort Carson, and that night we're sitting around the barracks, and there was a lot of guys from the south with us. It was real cold. Fort Carson, it was up by Pikes Peak. And I told those guys, it started raining, and I said, if that rain keeps up, it's going to be snow on the ground in the morning. The CQ came through in the morning and wake us up with snowballs. There was 36 inches of snow on the ground. And they had troops out in the field that they brought back in, and those guys said when they got up that morning, their pup tents were completely covered with snow. All these guys from the south, you know, they didn't know what to think. Well, pretty soon they said we were going to have snow shoveling details. So I thought, I don't feel like shoveling snow. So we watched and we saw a sergeant coming towards the barracks. We ran up or ran out and hid in the latrine. Well, I never did pick up a snow shovel. Well, then that snow slowed everything down, so we were about a day and a half late getting out of there. Well, then they took us to Pueblo, Colorado, and we flew then to Fort Hood, Texas. Actually, we landed in Temple, Texas, which is pretty near the base. And they picked us up there and took us to the barracks. Well, all the stories I'd heard from friends, you know, the basic training, really bad. It wasn't half bad. We actually had it pretty nice. And then from there I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky to a clerk school.
Well, anything in Fort Hood, with your training there that stands out?
Oh, not particularly. You know, when I got drafted, I thought I wasn't, you know, real hot to get drafted, but I got there, I said, hell with it. You know, let's play the game and enjoy the Army. And
Okay.
that's basically what I did.
And this was basic training, right?
Yeah.
So you must have went through gas chambers and...
Oh yeah, we went on, the week we went on bivouac, we got out there late in the day, we marched 15 miles. We set up our tents, we woke up in the morning, we were surrounded with cows. At Fort Hood, they leased out parts of the base for cattle grazing. So then we had to move. Well, then a couple of days later, we went to the rifle range, and as we were shooting, all of a sudden here comes a bunch of cows walking across the range. And one guy, hey Sarge, can we shoot one of those? No, I don't think so. They got him by, and I don't know if we must have spent 2 days on a rifle range, which it's all different now than then. In those days, they called it a KD range, meant known distance. And we'd shoot at 100, 200, 300, and 500 yards. Now, from what I've understood, guys, they don't do that known distance shooting anymore. And then we went through gas chambers. We got out in the field that time. The captain came out and he said, it's going to get cold tonight. He said, you better sleep with your full uniform on. He said, take your boots off, but in the morning when you get up, shake your boots out. There's scorpions around here. And
So you're sleeping at a tent?
yeah, a pup tent, 2-man pup tent.
Explain a pup tent. A lot of people don't know what a pup tent
It's
is.
just a little tiny tent. There's 2 halves to it. You and your buddy each have half of that tent. You put it up and you roll out your sleeping bag and crawl in there, and that's it. Well, we got up in the morning, it was about freezing out, which was pretty cold for Texas. And the captain came out and he said, well, I'll tell you what, he said, we're going to haul you back to the company for the noon meal. They brought trucks out, hauled us back to the company, had noon meal, went back out in the field. And we were out there a week, and then it warmed up a couple days later, but That cold night in Texas was cold.
So from basic training, you must have went to some kind of
Yeah,
advanced
I went to
training.
clerk school in Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Cook school?
Clerk,
Clerk school. Okay, sorry.
paper pusher. You know, when you go in the Army, in those days, you took it was called AFQT, Armed Forces Qualification Test. Well, I scored high in mechanical ability, so they made a clerk typist out of me.
Makes sense.
And then when we left basic, we went in and were interviewed, and they said, "Oh, where would you like to take basic training? Fort Riley, Kansas, or Fort Hood, Texas?" All being from the north, kind of, we all said, you know, Fort Riley, Kansas. Everybody that said Fort Riley, Kansas went to Fort Hood, Texas. Everybody that said Fort Hood, Texas went to Fort Riley, Kansas. We were at Fort Knox for, I think, 8 weeks. And while I was at Fort Knox, the captain called me in one day and he said, "I'm looking at your record." He said, "I see you're a college graduate and you're a teacher." Well, I said, "I'm going to be a teacher. I haven't taught yet." He said, "How would you like to teach here?" And I said, "Well, I'm not prepared to teach, you know, what you're teaching in this." Oh, he said, "The Army has a way of teaching. We teach you how to teach." And I said, "That sounds pretty good," because the guys that were teaching, they had private rooms in the barracks and all this kind of stuff, but nothing ever came of that. So when I got to Fort Hood, Texas, then I went to Fort Lee, Virginia. Got to Fort Lee, Virginia, small base. I got assigned to an ID card unit, making ID cards. The thing called for an E6 to be in charge of that, and that's what was in charge of it. All of a sudden, he got transferred. I'm left there, an E3, and I'm in charge of the ID card unit, making ID cards. So one day, a bunch of new lieutenants were transferred into Fort Lee. They had to get ID cards. Well, they were out in the hall just like a bunch of kids, and I went and told the officer in charge in the back room, I said, "What do I do with these guys?" I said, "They're officers." He said, "Go out there and tell them to shut the hell up." Okay, I went out and I hollered at him, and he looked at me, and I said, "Hey, listen, guys," I said, "we got a job to do here. There's quite a few. I got to take pictures of everybody. I really would appreciate it if you'd settle down." And they did. So I had that job for about 3 weeks, and then they brought a sergeant in, and then they moved me back. Then my job for the rest of the time was at Fort Lee, I discharged people. Well, being I was going to teach, I was going to have to get out of the Army early. So now several things happened. I got this job teaching in California.
Because of the school year.
Yeah, and so I had to get out of the Army early. Well, to get out of the Army early, I had to show the Army a signed contract. Well, I was in touch with the superintendent in California. Talked to him one morning. We talked there. He said, "Okay, I will hire you." Hired me sight unseen.
So how did you, California, you're from North Dakota, how did you get in touch with a California principal?
In those days, teaching salaries in California were considerably better than Minnesota and North Dakota. When I got to college in June of '59, I could have gone and taught at East Grand Forks where I graduated. In 1959, the starting salary for a teacher was $3,600 a year. And I went to California for $4,900. And actually it turned out to be 51, or 51.50, because the month after school started, they settled their annual salary thing, and we got a $250 raise above that. And I really had planned on staying in California. And when I met my wife, I told her, I said, "I came to California because I'm never going to shovel snow again." Well, a lot of things changed. That's just kind of a long story, but anyway, I ended up coming back to Minnesota, came here to Argyle, and wasn't going to stay here 2-3 years. I came here because I had a chance to get a head football coach's job. And at 2 or 3 years turned into 5 years, 6 years. Pretty soon all my kids were graduated. I'd been here 10 years, and right at that particular time, there wasn't a lot of teaching openings around. So we said, okay, we'll stay here a little longer. And We almost left once because after the third year, I had a difficult time finding housing. And anyway, that got worked out. And then we stayed in 1971. I built a new home in Argyle. And, you know, we've been there ever since. I coached football for 13 years. In 1971, I had an undefeated football team. And this end of this month, we're going to have a get together 50 years since that undefeated football team. And I coached football. I think my last year was 1976. And being a small school, maybe I taught industrial arts. I had a science minor. I taught science for a while. I was basically the principal for 8 years. I didn't have the necessary certificate, so they had to call me the dean of students, but I did everything that the principal did. But along the way, I was AD two different times. I even drove bus up part-time. I even swept the gym floor once at a basketball game.
Kind of did it all.
Yeah,
So
small schools.
thinking back, Al, during your military service, do you wish you'd have done anything different, or would have tried something different, or?
Yeah, you know, I thought about it. You know, originally, before I went to college, I wanted to be a mechanic. I messed with cars from the time I was about 13 years old. And in those days, there was no trade schools like there is today. In Minnesota, the only trade school at the time it's called Dunwoody Institute in Minneapolis. They had a 2-year waiting list to get in there. Well, a friend of mine and I had made some plans. Well, after I graduated from high school, a guy that had been in education and athletics all his life came to East Grand Forks and got in the insurance business for a while, but he was also a coach. And in a couple of years, he ended up getting a head coaching job at Augustana College in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So when we graduated, he recruited my best friend, another guy named Oral Hodge, me, and then his son. And we went to Augustana to play football. And we had a lot of fun playing football. I didn't do very well in school. And at the end of the year, my best friend was going to transfer to Bemidji. His parents had moved to Bemidji, and he said, "You can come and live with us." I said, "I don't think you and I should live together." I said, "I may be a worse influence on you than you are on me." I said, I can live at home, go to UND, and that's what happened. And I went to UND, and the college was a good experience, but I can't honestly say that I really liked school. And that probably sounds kind of weird coming from a teacher, especially a career teacher. I liked a lot of things about the military. Fort Lee was a small base. You couldn't hardly get promoted. If I got promoted, if I'd have made E4, I would have really considered signing up for another couple of years and see what would happen. But I guess I was fortunate. When I got drafted, the world was more or less at peace. The Russians were rattling their swords over there, but there was no war going on.
You feel the military served you well, or?
Oh yeah, when I got done, I enjoyed the experience of the military. And you know, all three of my sons were in the military. My oldest son made a career out of it, retired from the Navy as an E9. And Steve was in submarines, which was a different experience. And my youngest son I think he spent 14 years in the Navy. So they were all Navy guys. But Richard, our oldest son, I didn't really figure him for being a career man in the military. But I think he was a by-the-book soldier.
Maybe I can, when I start doing Zoom things, I can interview Richard.
Maybe if he's around here. Yeah, I think all my sons are proud of having been in the military.
The ones I've talked to, they were.
Yeah, you know all of them. Yeah. And
so Al, I want to thank you for doing this interview. I know you're an outstanding citizen in the community, and thank you for your service.
Well, you know, like I say, I was very fortunate. I didn't serve during wartime. I was too young for Korea, well, too young for World War II, obviously. Too young for Korea. I got married and had a family, and then that kind of made me exempt from having to go back. When I got out of the Army, I was supposed to stay in the reserves for, I think it was 4 years. When I got married, I had an instant family. And my job was discharging people, so I knew the ins and outs. So I did the paperwork and actually got my honorable discharge certificate when I was done with the military.
Yeah.
But probably, I discharged myself from the Army. when I got the word and got everything, the papers together, normally, the military chain of command. Well, I hand carried my paperwork. I started at 9 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was all set up to get out of the Army in about 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
Went to California and started being a teacher.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Al?
No, I don't think so. That covers it.
Okay, again, thank you for your service, Al.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the interview.